I want to check one thing before writing a 4500. Word request through the chat window is a lot of continuous prose, and given the platform note about file versus inline decisions, let me confirm you want this pasted directly in the chat rather than as a document, since you explicitly said not to create an artifact. Got it, writing it inline as requested. First-person male narrator 60 plus, addressing the audience by relationship terms. For example, my friend, you parents out there, targeting a U.S. audience. My name is Walter Hensley. I'm 68 years old, and for 42 years I ran Hensley & Sons millwork out of a converted barn in upstate New York, building custom cabinetry for people who wanted something better than what the big box stores could offer. My late wife Dorothy and I raised one daughter, Claire, and I want to tell you what happened 3 months ago at her engagement party, because I think a lot of you, especially you fathers and mothers who gave your children everything, are going to recognize pieces of yourselves in this story. It started with my other daughter, June, grabbing my elbow so hard I nearly dropped my drink. "Dad, we need to leave. Right now." I turned to look at her. Her face had gone the color of old paper. Around us, the party kept going, string lights, a jazz trio, the smell of grilled shrimp drifting off the catering tables. "June, what's wrong with you? We just got here." She didn't answer. She just pulled me toward the side gate of the property, her fingers digging into my jacket sleeve, and she didn't say another word until we were both sitting in my truck with the doors shut and the party noise muffled behind glass. "June, talk to me." She turned to face me, and her eyes were wet. "Dad, did you actually read the trust paperwork before you signed it last week? Or did you just sign where Marcus told you to sign?" I felt something cold drop straight through my chest, because I already knew the honest answer. And the honest answer was that I hadn't read every page. Let me back up, because you need to understand how we got to that parking lot before I tell you what June said next. Claire is my oldest. She's 31, sharp as a tack, went to Cornell on a partial scholarship that Dorothy and I worked ourselves ragged to supplement. When Dorothy passed 4 years ago from ovarian cancer, Claire was the one who held the family together, who planned the funeral, who checked on me every single day for months when I could barely get out of bed. I want you to understand that. Whatever happened later, Claire was a good daughter for a long, long time, and some of what I'm about to tell you still doesn't make sense to me, even now. 2 years ago, Claire met a man named Marcus Reyes at a financial planning seminar in Albany. He was polished, quick with a joke, always dressed like he'd stepped out of a catalog for expensive watches. He told everyone he managed a boutique wealth advisory firm, that he'd grown up modest in Buffalo and built himself up from nothing. I liked him at first. Lord help me, I did. He shook my hand firm, looked me in the eye, asked me real questions about the business, and seemed to actually listen to the answers. Dorothy would have liked him too, I remember thinking. And that thought alone should have been a warning, because I was measuring him against a ghost instead of against what was standing in front of me. Within 8 months, Marcus had moved into Claire's condo. Within 14 months, he was talking about marriage. And somewhere in there, so quietly I barely noticed it happening, he started talking about consolidating the family's financial position for the next generation. That's a nice way of saying he wanted access to my money. I'd built something real with that mill shop, folks. 42 years of getting up before sunrise, of cutting my hands on table saws, of driving 2 hours round trip to deliver a single custom staircase because I refused to let a subcontractor botch the install. I'd sold the business 18 months back to a regional company for just under $4 million. And after taxes and paying off the last of the shop mortgage, I had a little over $3 million sitting in accounts, plus the house, plus a small rental property in Saratoga Springs that Dorothy and I bought back when we thought we'd retire there together. Marcus started small. A dinner where he happened to mention a friend who lost everything because his father died without a proper trust, and the state took 1/3 of it in fees. Then a lunch where he brought a folder of brochures for generational wealth protection structures. Then, about 4 months ago, he sat across from me at my own kitchen table with Claire beside him, holding her hand, and told me he could set up an irrevocable trust that would protect my assets from nursing home costs, from lawsuits, from predatory relatives. He actually used that phrase, predatory relatives, while looking sideways at my own younger daughter, June, who was sitting right there. June is 26. She's a veterinary technician, lives 40 minutes from me, comes over most Sundays to help me with the yard work I can't do like I used to since my knee replacement. She never asked me for a dime in her life. And Marcus had the nerve to sit at my table and plant the idea that she might come after my money someday, like she was some kind of threat sitting 3 feet away eating my pot roast. I should have thrown him out of my house that night. Instead, like a fool, I let him keep talking. Here is what I know now, and did not know then. Marcus Reyes did not run a wealth advisory firm. He ran what investigators would later call a trust mill operation. He'd find aging parents with liquid assets, usually widowers, usually men who'd built something with their hands and were emotionally isolated after losing a spouse, and he'd work his way in through a son or daughter, always positioning himself as the fiancé who just wants to help the family plan ahead. The trust documents he drew up weren't standard irrevocable trusts at all. Buried in the boilerplate language, on page 11 of a 14-page document, was a clause naming Marcus as sole trustee with unilateral authority to reallocate assets for tax efficiency purposes, meaning he alone would control every dollar, with no oversight, the moment I signed. And I signed. 11 days before that engagement party, sitting in a lawyer's office that Marcus had recommended, a lawyer I later learned he'd paid a referral kickback to, I signed page after page while Claire smiled at me from across the table and told me how relieved she was that Dad's finally getting his affairs in order. I want to pause here, you parents listening to this, because I know some of you are already screaming at your screens asking why I didn't read every single page. I've asked myself that same question every night since. Grief does something to a man. After Dorothy died, I got tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I wanted someone else to carry the weight of decisions for a while. Marcus offered to carry that weight, and I let him. And that is the whole ugly truth of how good men get taken. So there I was, in my truck in that parking lot, with June asking me if I'd actually read what I signed. June, tell me what you know, right now. She was crying by then, and she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I've been seeing Marcus's old business partner. His name's Danny. We've been together about 2 months. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to be weird with Claire's wedding coming up. But Danny used to work with Marcus at his last firm in Rochester before it shut down. He told me tonight, right before the party, that firm didn't shut down because business was slow. It shut down because the state attorney general's office opened an investigation into Marcus for running the exact same trust scheme on 3 other families. 2 of those families lost their houses. One of those men, Dad, he was 74. He ended up in assisted living paid for by Medicaid, because every asset he had was gone within a year of signing with Marcus. End quote. I sat there in that truck and I felt something I hadn't felt since the day Dorothy's doctor called with her diagnosis. A very specific, very quiet kind of terror. Not panic. Something colder than panic. Why didn't this Danny fellow come forward before? Why now? Because Marcus fired him and threatened to ruin his professional license if he ever talked. Danny's scared, Dad, but he's engaged to me now too. In a manner of speaking. And he watched what happened to those other families, and he can't sit at your daughter's engagement party tonight and just let it happen to you too. I sat in silence for a long moment. Then I asked her the only question that mattered. Does Claire know? June's face crumpled. Dad, I don't know. I honestly don't know if she's in on it or if she's being fooled just like you were. I don't know which is worse. I want you to sit with that question for a second, because it sat with me for the better part of 3 months. Which is worse, a daughter who helps a con man rob her own father, or a daughter so blinded by love that she becomes a tool without ever meaning to be one? I made a decision in that truck that night, and here is where I have to tell you the part of this story that some of you might not like. I did not storm back into that party and confront Marcus in front of 40 guests. I did not call the police from the parking lot. I went back inside, my friend, and I smiled, and I hugged my daughter, and I toasted the happy couple with a glass of champagne I did not drink, because I needed time to find out the truth before I lost my daughter along with my money. The following morning, I drove 2 hours to Rochester and found Danny myself. He was younger than I expected, maybe 32, nervous, kept glancing at the door of the diner like Marcus might walk through it. But he laid it all out for me, bank routing details he still had from his time doing back-office work at the old firm, the pattern of how Marcus structured these trusts, the names of 2 attorneys in 3 counties who Marcus paid to look the other way. Danny gave me a name, a forensic accountant in Syracuse named Priscilla Nkemdarim, who specialized in exactly this kind of elder financial exploitation and had already helped 2 other families claw back what they'd lost. I hired Priscilla that same week, And I told her one thing: find out everything, and find out fast, because my daughter's wedding was set for 11 weeks away, and once that ring went on her finger and Marcus became legally family, this was going to be twice as hard to untangle. For the next 6 weeks, my friend, I lived a kind of double life. I never imagined I'd have to live at 68 years old. In public, I played the part of the doting father, thrilled about the wedding, happily attending cake tastings and venue walkthroughs, letting Marcus clap me on the shoulder and call me Pop, like we were already family. Privately, every few days, Priscilla sent me documents that made my hands shake. The trust I'd signed had already been used as collateral to open a business line of credit in an entity called Meridian Legacy Partners LLC, an entity Marcus controlled entirely. With my name nowhere on the paperwork despite my assets backing the loan, $200,000 of that credit line had already been drawn down and moved into an account in the Bahamas. My rental property in Saratoga Springs had a lien quietly filed against it that I never authorized. And worst of all, Priscilla found messages, subpoenaed from a cloud backup during her investigation, with a cooperating whistleblower's help, between Marcus and someone saved in his phone as C messages where Marcus wrote, quote, "Once the wedding's done and Walter trusts me completely, we push the second phase and move the house." I asked Priscilla point blank whether C was Claire. She told me the messages didn't specify a last name, and she wouldn't speculate without proof. I appreciated her honesty, but I stopped sleeping much after that. Here is the part where I have to slow down and tell you exactly what I did, because I think it matters more than anything else in this story. I did not go to the police first. I know some of you will judge me for that, but June was right that night in the truck. I needed to know if my daughter was a victim or a conspirator before I decided how to save her. And only the truth, laid out where she couldn't deny it, was going to answer that question. 9 days before the wedding, I called a family meeting at my house. Just me, Claire, and Marcus. I told them I wanted to go over the final wedding logistics and talk about a wedding gift I was planning. I told them I was considering deeding them the Saratoga Springs rental property outright as a wedding present, free and clear, no strings attached. You should have seen Marcus's face light up like a Christmas display. He tried so hard to play it cool, but his eyes gave him away completely. "Walter, that's an incredibly generous gesture," he said, "but really, you don't need to decide anything tonight. Let's have Claire's attorney friend draw up the paperwork properly, no rush at all." He wanted it done through his own channels. Of course he did. I set a manila folder down on the coffee table between us. "Actually," I said, "I already had paperwork drawn up, by my own attorney, someone neither of you has met." Claire looked confused, glancing between me and Marcus. Marcus's smile stayed frozen in place, but something behind his eyes had gone very still and very cold. I opened the folder and started reading, slow and steady, the way I used to read blueprint measurements out loud to my crew before we cut an expensive piece of walnut, because with wood you only get one chance to cut it right. I read them the balance of the Bahamas account. I read them the name Meridian Legacy Partners LLC. I read them the lien on the Saratoga property. And then I read them the text message, word for word. "Once the wedding's done and Walter trusts me completely, we push the second phase and move the house." Marcus stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped backward. "This is insane. This is a misunderstanding, Walter. You don't understand how trusts work. I can explain every single one of those transactions." "I'm sure you can," I said. "You'll get your chance. With federal investigators, they're very interested in what happened in Rochester, too." Claire hadn't said a single word this whole time. She was staring at the folder, and then she looked up at Marcus, and I watched something break across her face that I will remember until the day I die. It was not the face of a woman caught in a lie. It was the face of a woman realizing, in real time, in front of her own father, that the man she was about to marry had been using her as a door into her father's life savings. "Marcus," she whispered. "Who is C?" His silence answered the question better than any confession could have. Claire turned to me, tears streaming, and said the words I had prayed for 6 straight weeks that she would say. "Dad, I swear to you, I swear on Mom's grave, I did not know. I thought he loved me. I thought this trust was protecting you. I believed every single thing he told me. I believed her. I want you to know that, my friend, because not every story like this one ends with a wicked child. Sometimes it ends with a wicked stranger who fooled everyone, including the person closest to him, And the family that survives it is the family that manages to tell the difference between a victim and a villain before it's too late to fix anything. I had already called Priscilla and my attorney to be waiting on standby that evening, along with 2 investigators from the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit who had, it turned out, been building a case against Marcus for the better part of 4 months already, thanks to the 2 other families who'd come forward after losing their homes. Danny's information had simply been the missing piece connecting Marcus's Rochester scheme to his new operation in our county. They arrested him in my living room, my friend, right there on the same rug where Dorothy used to sit and do her crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings. He screamed about lawyers and misunderstandings the entire time they walked him out to the car, and not one person in that room, including his own fiancé, said a single word in his defense. The wedding, obviously, never happened. It took Priscilla and the state investigators another 5 months to fully unwind everything Marcus had done. I got the trust voided entirely through a fraud claim, since it turned out the entire document was invalid from the start due to the concealed conflict of interest and the forged trustee authorization language. I got the Saratoga lien released. I never saw the full $200,000 that moved to the Bahamas. Most of it had already been gambled away or moved further offshore before investigators could freeze it, though I did recover about $60,000 of it through a civil judgment. Marcus pled guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and is currently serving 6 years in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. The 2 other families from Rochester also received restitution judgments, though nowhere near what they'd actually lost. Claire moved back into my house for about 4 months after everything fell apart. We didn't talk about it much at first. She was ashamed, and I understood that shame, because I carried my own version of it too, the shame of an old man who let his grief make him careless with everything his wife and he had spent a lifetime building. One night, about 2 months into her staying with me, Claire sat down next to me on the porch and asked me something I still think about constantly. She asked, "Dad, why didn't you just call the police the morning after the engagement party? Why did you spend 6 weeks pretending everything was fine?" And I told her the truth. I said, because I needed to know if I still had a daughter, or if I only had a thief wearing my daughter's face. And the only way to find that out was to give you the chance to show me who you really were, before I burned the whole thing down. She cried for a long time after that. Then she hugged me, and she said, "I'm my mother's daughter, Dad. Whatever else happened, I hope you still believe that." I do believe that. Every single day. June and Danny got married last spring, in a small ceremony in my backyard, under the same oak tree where Dorothy used to hang a bird feeder every autumn. Claire stood up as June's maid of honor, and when she gave her toast, she looked right at me and said that the greatest gift our family ever received wasn't the money I'd built, or the house, or any inheritance at all. It was learning, the hard way, who actually deserved to be trusted with any of it. I think about Marcus sometimes, sitting in that federal facility. I don't feel hatred toward him anymore. Not really. I feel something closer to pity, because a man who has to lie his way into a family to feel like he belongs somewhere has already lost something I never will, no matter what happens to my bank account. I built Hensley & Sons with my own 2 hands, plank by plank. And I can tell you this much for certain. Nothing anyone ever tries to take from you can touch the thing that actually matters, which is whether the people who love you are still standing beside you when the lie finally falls apart. To every mother and father listening to this who has ever wondered whether you're being too trusting, too generous, too quick to hand your children and their partners the keys to everything you built, trust your instincts. Read every page. Ask the uncomfortable question. And if someone in your life makes you feel guilty for asking it, that feeling in your gut isn't paranoia, my friend. It's 40 years of hard-earned wisdom trying to save you. If this story meant something to you, stay a while longer, because I have many more of these to share, and I promise you every single one of them is true. Trust isn't about never being fooled, it's about staying close enough to the people you love that the truth has a chance to surface before it's too late. Walter didn't save his money by being suspicious. He saved his family by staying patient long enough to see who was standing beside him when the lie broke. That's the real inheritance. Not the house, not the trust fund, but knowing who stays. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope the gentle life lesson woven through it still lands somewhere true.